Welcome to your second session of your performance strategy revision program. Now, in the previous session, what we covered was, I gave you all a brief introduction to forex risk. I told you all what forex risk was about. We then moved into looking at the different types of forex risk. Yeah, we looked at your transaction risk, we looked at your translation risk, and then we looked at your economic risk. Okay, and then we looked at the purpose of hedging, or why do we hedge our forex risk. And I would have told you the purpose of hedging is to fix your cost or revenue. It is about removing the uncertainty arising from movements in exchange rates. And then we would have looked at the different techniques of hedging. We would have looked at your internal techniques and your external techniques, or rather your internal methods and your external methods. Your internal techniques, we would have discussed the do nothing method or the do nothing option. We would have talked about matching. We would have talked about netting, be it bilateral or multilateral. We would have talked about leading and lagging, and we would have talked about invoicing in home currency and barter trade. And we would have also discussed what are the relative advantages and disadvantages of these methods. What are the constraints of these methods? And I would have told you that when you are hedging your forex risk, you will always first adopt the internal techniques and only then move on to your external techniques if there is any remaining exposure. Right? And then we moved on to your external hedging techniques. What are these external hedging techniques? We talked about your forward contracts. We talked about your options, right? We talked about your money market hedging. And today we will continue from where we left off last week. We will look at futures as a method of hedging your exchange rate risk. So that was a quick recap of what we did last week, right? And I will remind you again the importance of this syllabus area, your foreign exchange risk management area of the syllabus. I told you last week, remember, over the last 4 papers, this area has been continually tested for at least 25 marks. And what is our exam strategy? Our exam strategy is we are going to target this area and we are going to get as much marks out of this area as possible. So I will now move on to hedging your forex risk using futures contracts. What is a futures contract? It's very similar to a forward. It's very similar to a currency forward. But there are subtle differences. Okay. Futures contracts have standard sizes. They have standard expiry dates. They are normally for 3-month durations, right? And they normally expire on the 31st, or rather they normally expire at the end of a quarter. What does that mean? You enter into a contract on the 1st of Jan, it's likely to expire on the 31st of March. Likewise, the next expiry date on a futures contract would be the 31st of July, 31st of September, and 31st of December, and so on. These are also tradable instruments. You could purchase them off the futures exchange. So that is the basic characteristics of a futures contract. In terms of their behavior, if you want to hedge a certain amount using a futures contract, let's say for example £100,000, you do not need to place £100,000 with the futures exchange. What you need to do is you only need to place what we call an initial margin at the time of entering into a futures contract, and this initial margin would be a percentage of the hedge, the value you want to hedge. Normally, let's say something like 5 to 10%. So if you wanted to hedge £100,000, you only need to place a deposit of £10,000 to hedge this exposure. As a result, futures contracts have become a very attractive product for speculation. Why? Let's say, for example, you want to speculate up to £1 million. Does it mean that you need to have £1 million? No. All you need is £100,000. Clear? Now, having given you a basic definition of what a futures contract is, I will now move on to the mechanics of a futures contract. How does a futures contract work? Right? This is a relatively complicated area. What you need to remember is the exam will not test you on calculations relating to futures contracts. Okay? It has not been tested so far, so you don't need to worry about it too much. But let's look at how it works. Let's say, for example, you want to import $1 million worth of goods. Okay? And the payment due date is in 1 month's time. So what happens, you enter into the transaction today and you need to make payment in 1 month's time. Always remember, when we talk about hedging a contract or hedging an exposure using futures contracts, there are two transactions. What are these two transactions? One set of transactions happen on the forex market, another set of transactions occur on the futures market. So now let's look at the mechanics of how a futures contract works. Now, before I go into this, when you talk about a futures contract, there is one thing you need to remember. When you are hedging using a futures contract, transactions will occur on two markets. What are these two markets? The forex market and the futures market. Let's look at an example. We will assume that I am importing $1 million worth of goods for which payment needs to be made in 1 month's time. So, if I am hedging using futures, assuming the spot is $1 is equal to 100 rupees today, I don't need to enter into any transactions on the forex market. I don't need to worry about the forex market today. But I need to go to the futures market and I need to enter into a futures contract to buy dollars. Okay? So what I do is I buy futures now. I enter into a contract to buy $1 at 110 rupees in 3 months time. Okay? So that's what I do now. I enter into a futures contract to buy $1 at 110 rupees in 3 months time. And then we wait for 1 month, transaction payment due date occurs. Okay? But will I get the required amount of dollars from this futures contract? No. Why not? This futures contract is to buy dollars in how many months' time? In 3 months' time, not 1 month's time. So we have a problem. I have a contract, but it says delivery of dollars in 3 months' time, but I need dollars now, in 1 month's time. Can I tell my supplier, look, I'm sorry, can you hang on for 2 months and I'll make you payment? No. So what you do is, you go on to the forex market and you buy dollars on the payment due date at the prevailing spot. We will assume that on the date of payment, or on the payment due date, $1 is equal to 120 rupees. So therefore, your total transaction cost would be 120 million rupees. And as a result of this adverse movement in exchange rates, you are incurring a loss of 10 rupees per dollar and a total loss of rupees 10 million. But then the question arises, I entered into a futures contract, where is the hedge? The moment you buy dollars on the market, you no longer require your futures contract. Why? Because the exposure is gone. So what do? You need to nullify the impact of that futures contract you initially bought. When you enter into a futures contract, or when you enter into this futures contract, you are entering into a contract for a counterparty to deliver $1 million to you. So how do you nullify the impact of this contract? You do the opposite of what you initially did. You will sell futures contracts. What you will do is, you will enter into a contract to sell $1 million at the prevailing futures rate.
Welcome for this revision program conducted by SEMA Sri Lanka.
Do we have the capacity to be operating this particular profit maximizing price?
We love mathematics oriented subjects.
Counting depreciation is not allowed for tax purposes.
A foreign currency liability on a future date.
Satisfaction lies in the effort, not the attainment. Full effort gives full victory.
SEMA Revision, Monday to Wednesday at 9:30 p.m.
Moving on to your forex swaps, let's take a quick example and see how they work. Let's assume you are A Limited in Sri Lanka and you are receiving or rather taking a loan of $1 million which is repayable in 5 years time. Assuming the current spot rate is $1 is equal to 100 rupees, upon conversion this loan would be worth 100 million rupees. Now we'll assume this is a bullet payment loan where you service interest only over the period of 5 years and you repay the entire capital at the end of 5 years. So your capital repayment is in dollars, and we will now fast forward 5 years and we will see what happens if the dollar has gone up to 150 rupees. Your repayment is how much now? Your total repayment is 150 million rupees. You now have to pay 50 million more as a result of the movement in your dollar rupee exchange rate. How are we going to manage this risk? How can we hedge this risk? Can we enter into a futures, forward or options contract to hedge this risk? No. Those are short-term methods of hedging, whereas this is a longer-term exposure. So let's see how the swap works. Let's look at the mechanics of a swap. So if you are A, what you will do is you will take your loan, we will assume from bank C for $1 million, and what you will do is you will find yourself a counterparty who is willing to take dollars and give you rupees in exchange. So what we do is we first go and swap $1 million for 100 million rupees at the point of receiving the loan. But we tell this counterparty, look here, I will give you $1 million now, you give me rupees, but I want this $1 million back in 5 years time. So your counterparty also needs to be agreeable to your swap. And at the time of making this agreement, you fix the rate at which you re-swap your dollars for rupees at $1 is equal to rupees 130. What does this mean? At the time B gives you back $1 million, $1 you have to pay him 130 rupees. Now let's move forward 5 years and look at the second leg of the swap, where A and B will re-swap the initial capital amounts. What happens? B gives A $1 million and in exchange A gives B 130 million rupees. Why? Because they agreed that they will swap $1 for 130 rupees in 5 years time. Now what has happened as a result of this transaction? No matter what the dollar rupee exchange rate is in 5 years time, the cost of this transaction is fixed at 130 million rupees. So effectively A has fixed the rupee cost of repaying this loan in 5 years time. And what does A now do? It has $1 million. It will use this $1 million to repay bank C and the transaction is concluded. But when you look at this transaction, you must be thinking, okay, how am I going to find myself a counterparty who has the exact same needs as I do? How are you going to find someone with complementary needs? Yes, it's a bit difficult, but that's where banks play a role. Your bank or other banks would act as intermediaries or brokers in finding you a suitable counterparty, and for this service they provide, they will charge you a swap fee. Sometimes the bank would accept risk of default, whereas in other instances the bank may not accept risk of default. Depending on either of the two, they will charge you a higher fee. What are the potential advantages of a swap transaction? There are a couple of advantages. The first one being it provides you access to markets, capital markets, which you might not be able to borrow from. Similarly, it will also allow you to hedge your longer term exposures which are not hedgeable by short term products. What are the potential risks associated with your swap? The first risk being the risk of default. But in the event of a default, if B doesn't pay you back dollars, what you do is you don't pay him rupees. So therefore the only risk you are really exposed to there is the potential loss you could incur on the movement of the dollar rupee exchange rate, which is what you were trying to hedge all along. Fine. We will now move on to something similar to your forex swaps, what we call a currency swap. A currency swap is very similar to your forex swap, but the only difference here is it also involves the payment of interest during the period. Let's look at an example straight away and try to see, or rather try to understand how this works. We will assume that there are two companies, X which is based in the UK and Y which is based in the US. X wants to borrow $120 million for 5 years, whereas Y wants to borrow 100 million pounds for 5 years. What are the borrowing rates in the US, in the UK? If X wants to borrow dollars, he has to pay 10%. If he wants to borrow pounds, he has to pay 5%. If Y wants to borrow dollars, he has to pay 6%. And if he wants to borrow pounds, he has to pay 9%. If you look at the two exchange rates carefully, you can see that it is cheaper for X to borrow pounds and it is cheaper for Y to borrow dollars. And if you also look at the amounts in the current spot rate, you could see that they are an exact match. If you convert 100 million pounds to dollars, it is $120 million. So the amounts are complementary, the durations of the loan are also complementary, and also we could see that there is a potential benefit if these two parties were to borrow on each other's behalf. That is how the swap works. Let's look at the mechanics carefully. I have broken this up into 3 legs for ease of explanation. Let's look at the first leg. What happens? X will take a loan of 100 million pounds from X's bank. Why does X borrow in pounds? Because it is cheaper for X to borrow in pounds. And then Y will take a loan of $120 million from Y's bank. Why does Y borrow in dollars? Because it is cheaper if Y borrows in dollars. And then what is the issue? X wants dollars, Y wants pounds. But now they don't have what they want, so what they do is they swap. So X will give 100 million pounds to Y and Y will give $120 million to X. And at this point in time they will agree on the re-swapping rate. We will assume here for illustration purposes that the re-swap rate is the original rate at which the transaction was swapped. Let's move on to the next leg of the transaction. What is this leg of the transaction? The servicing of interest. Let's look at it carefully. X borrowed from X's bank in pounds, therefore X has to pay interest to X's bank. The loan agreement is between these two parties. Similarly, Y borrowed in dollars from Y's bank and therefore Y has to pay dollar interest to Y's bank. Now what do? There is a problem. What is the problem? X says that look, you are using the pounds, I am paying interest on the pounds, that's not fair, you reimburse me the pound interest cost, which Y does. And similarly, Y says, look, you are using the dollar loan, please reimburse me the interest I am paying on the dollar loan. And this is how the interest commitments are swapped between the two parties. And finally, in the third leg of the swap, what happens? Y gives back 100 million pounds to X, X gives back $120 million to Y, and then they settle each other's banks, thereby removing the long-term forex exposure. What are the potential benefits of this transaction? The potential benefits of this transaction is that both parties, by entering into the swap, have managed to reduce their interest cost as a result of getting these preferential rates in their local markets. Moving on from your swaps, we will now go on to your forecasting of exchange rates, which is another part of your syllabus which you need to look at carefully. There are three methods of forecasting your exchange rates. You have your purchasing power parity, you have your interest rate parity, and you also have something called your four-way equivalence theory. Let's look at your purchasing power parity first. This is the formula. I am sure you are familiar with the formula. We will move on to what purchasing power parity says and then revisit the formula for a bit. What does purchasing power parity says? It says, look, the currency of a country with a higher inflation rate will see its currency depreciate against the currency of a country with a lower inflation rate. What does that mean in English? You have Sri Lanka, inflation rate 20%. You have the US, inflation rate 10%. What is going to happen? The Sri Lankan rupee should depreciate against the dollar. Is that clear? Okay. Now let's move on to, or let's move back to the formula. When you come to this formula, there is one thing I need to highlight. You need to be very careful when you are substituting the inflation rates of the counter currency and the base currency. Always remember, your base currency will be dependent on how the currency has been quoted. Is that clear? Okay. This is an area which I have observed that most students find a bit confusing. So what I would advise is, once you do your calculation, right, you then go back to what the theory says, right, the logic of the theory, and you compare the two answers. If the two answers tally, great, you've got the calculation wrong. If the two answers don't tally, please revisit the calculation, and probably what you need to look at is in what is the currency or the base currency in which it has been quoted. That is something you need to look at very carefully. We will then move on to your interest rate parity. What does interest rate parity say? Something very similar to your purchasing power parity. What they say is basically, look, the currency of a country with a high interest rate will see its currency depreciate against the currency of a country with a lower interest rate. In English, Sri Lanka has an interest rate of 15%, the United States has an interest rate of 10%. What is expected to happen? What is expected to happen is that the Sri Lankan rupee will depreciate against the US dollar. The Sri Lankan rupee will become weaker. We will have to pay more rupees per dollar. That is what your interest rate parity says. Again, I would like to draw attention to your formula. When you are substituting items onto this formula, please look at the currency, the way in which the currency has been quoted when you try to identify your base currency. Absolutely critical, and again compare against the logic or the rationale of what this theory says. Okay, we'll move on a bit more. There's this four-way equivalence in your syllabus. How does it work? Basically, it identifies relationships between your purchasing power parity and your interest rate parity. If you move horizontally, it shows you your Fisher effect and your expectations theory. If you move diagonally, it shows you the international Fisher effect, and if you go vertically, you have your IRPT and your triple PT. What can you use this for? It's a very handy formula to remember if you want to predict your exchange rates. You see, what happens is, depending on the information that is given to you in the exam, you could use these different formulas to calculate your either exchange rates, expected exchange rates, or inflation rates, etc. You could use this formula. What is the practical application of this in the exam? Two possibilities. One possibility is your performance strategy paper. They might ask you to predict exchange rates on a future date. Whereas in your financial strategy paper, you might have to use these theories we learnt about to forecast exchange rates when you are doing international investment appraisal, where you could convert your foreign currency cash flows into local currency cash flows, or vice versa. We are more or less done with your foreign exchange risk management. Another few areas I wanted to touch on in this revision program is your interest rate risk management. So what is your interest rate risk management? What is the risk we are trying to hedge here? I'll give you an example. Assume that you realize that you will have a shortfall of cash in 6 months' time. So therefore, when you do your cash flow forecasts, you establish that in 6 months' time you need to borrow $10 million. Okay? Today the interest rate is 10%. The risk you are exposed to here is in 6 months' time, when you take your $10 million loan, would the interest rate have moved adversely? If it goes up to 15%, you will now be borrowing at 15%, whereas you could have borrowed at 10%, and thereby you are incurring an incremental cost of 5%. How do we manage this risk? Let's look at a couple of instruments. Let's look at the very basic instrument. You have what we call a forward rate agreement. I'm not going to go into the definitions, but I'll give you a small illustration on how it works. What you need to remember when you talk about an FRA or forward rate agreement is that there are essentially two transactions. One transaction is you will actually have to go onto the market on the date on which you need the loan and borrow at the prevailing market rate. The second transaction is you would have entered into a forward rate agreement or an FRA to fix your interest rate, cost or receipt. Let's look at it. We will assume that you want to borrow $10 million in 3 months' time for a period of 12 months. So, the actual borrowing takes place in 3 months' time and the loan repayment period is 12 months. The duration of this total transaction is 15 months. How did we get 15 months? 12-month loan plus the loan is taken in 3 months' time. 3 plus 12 is 15. What are the transactions you need to enter into? As at now, you do nothing on the money market, but you enter into an FRA and we'll fix your rate at, let's assume 10%. Okay? So what does that mean? No matter how your interest rates move on the market, your interest cost should be fixed at 10%. We'll fast forward 3 months and what happens? The interest rate has moved up to 15%. As a result, your incremental cost is 5%. 5% into 10 million is $0.5 million. How am I saying your incremental cost is 5%? If you borrowed now, you could have borrowed at 10%, but since you are borrowing in 3 months' time, you are borrowing at 15%. But then you will ask, where is the hedge? What is the impact of me entering into a hedge? That FRA you entered into, let's look at what happens as a result of you entering into the FRA. The FRA fixes your cost at 10%, so what happens is the counterparty says, look, you fixed your rate at 10%, however the interest rate has gone up to 15%, therefore that additional 5% you are paying, I will reimburse you. And the counterparty to your FRA reimburses you this $0.5 million. Now what happens? That 5 million or the 0.5 million incremental cost you incurred on the market, on the money market, is set off against the 0.5 million you receive from your counterparty, and your cost is fixed at how much? 10%. Let's look at a situation where the interest rates decline. Same set of transactions. Let's straight away go to the market transaction and the FRA. If the interest rate moves from 10% to 5%, you're saving 5% of interest cost. So therefore you're actually getting a benefit of 5%. However, because you entered into the FRA, what happens is you now need to reimburse the counterparty. What happens? The counterparty comes to you and says, look, you fixed your rate at 10%, but you're only paying 5%. Therefore, please give me back that other 5%. And now what happens? You need to pay this 5% to the counterparty. And as a result, whatever benefit you gained as a result of the favorable movements in your interest rates is wiped off by the repayment or the reimbursement to your counterparty. But still, if you look at this instrument, what has happened? You have fixed your cost at how much? 10%. That is the nature of forward rate agreements. Moving on, let's quickly move on to your interest rate swaps, something that I wanted to touch on before your exams. How does it work? We will take a quick example. You have A company and B company. Both companies want to borrow $10 million, but A company wants to borrow floating while B company wants to borrow fixed. If you look at the interest rates, you could see that A has an advantage in borrowing fixed. Why? Because A can borrow at 10%, whereas B can borrow at 15%. There is no benefit on the LIBORs. Why is this? Maybe the credit ratings of the two companies differ, but let's not go into that. Let's look at how this swap would work out. Right? So, we'll go back to this slide. Obviously, what happens here is it makes more sense if A were to borrow fixed. Okay? So, what happens? A borrows from A's bank at a fixed rate, $10 million, and B borrows from B's bank at a floating rate, $10 million. But what is the problem? A wants variable, B wants fixed. Okay, let's look at it. Because A borrowed fixed, it has to pay interest fixed at 10%. Because B borrowed floating, it has to pay interest at LIBOR plus 2% floating. But again, I would repeat, A wants variable, B wants fixed. How do you overcome this problem? Simple. A pays B floating and B pays A fixed. So as a result, what has happened due to this transaction is that the interest rate commitments, this fixed and floating rates, have been swapped. Okay? What you need to remember in your exam is, number one, the mechanics of the swap, how does this work, and number two, in the examination, right, given that A could borrow at 10% and B can borrow at 15%, there is a benefit to be gained by both parties. That 5% interest, there is a benefit that could be gained by both parties. Okay? So, you need to know how you are going to split this benefit between the two parties and arrive at the total cost to A and the total cost to B. That is something you need to look at in your exam. This has been tested in your performance strategy paper. So you need to look at it carefully, but what is critical is you understand how the swap works. So I pretty much covered most of the areas I wanted to touch on. I hope that I have contributed to your cause of passing your performance strategy examination in November 2014, and I would like to take this opportunity to wish you all the best. Good luck for exams, guys. If there is any clarifications you all want, or if there are any questions you need to ask, you are more than welcome to contact me. I have given you my email address here. So if there are any concerns, any questions, please drop me an email. I will definitely respond as soon as possible. And again, thank you and good luck for the exams.